We are in the podcast studio of Asia Tech Podcast here in Singapore. Graham Brown, joined by Tushar Aggarwal. Tushar, welcome.
Thanks, Graham, for having me.
It's great to have you here. Well, I've known you for some time. I don't know you that well. And obviously we're connected on LinkedIn, and I know you as a podcast host. So hopefully we'll get a chance to find out a bit more about the man and the story, the journey behind it. You have got this side hustle, which is the podcast, which we'll talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah.
But you also come from the world of investment and startups. You are now principal of a fund, the Lunex Ventures, right? So
that's right.
But you're very much in the crypto blockchain space as well. So I'm going to learn a lot in the next 35 minutes.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
That's a schooling for me, right? So Tushar, let's start with the podcast first. Let's put that on the table. Decrypt Asia. I've followed it as well because you've experimented with some formats as well and tried some different things. How long have you been going? How many episodes have you done?
Sure. So I've done about 31 myself. I recently onboarded a Korean podcaster who does podcasts in the Korean language. And so different interviewees, different script. But the idea is, so the reason I called it Decrypt Asia and not Decrypt is because I wanted the word Asia in it. What happens in the crypto landscape is you've got these bunch of podcasts and it's sort of an echo chamber. So you've got most of these podcasts based out of North America with about 50 to 100 people just hopping around on different shows and interviewing each other. I kind of wanted to interview people who don't generally get interviewed. And the idea was Asia is unique in the sense that you have different sort of regional languages. So you got Mandarin. China is a big country as far as crypto is concerned. Korea is massive. Hong Kong is big. Singapore is obviously up there. So what I wanted to do was kind of create like a network of podcasts where I have podcasters in different speaking different languages, doing podcasts.
Yeah, I mean it's great as well. Give a voice to Asian podcasters as well. Because,
absolutely, it's not that big in Asia yet. No. I mean, podcasting in general, I think it's catching up. I think I'm not familiar with China. It's a bit of a black box for me. But I come from India. I know there is a decent podcasting culture now. There's comedy shows, there's stuff about Bollywood, there's stuff about cricket and a whole lot of other things. But yeah, as far as crypto is concerned, I only know one other podcaster from this part of the world who also works at a fund.
Right, yeah, okay. So I think the interesting thing about this space is, I mean, podcasting in general in Asia is that obviously we kind of look to America for ideas and inspiration. They're a few years ahead and they've monetized it. They've worked it out. But even still here in Asia, it's sort of people are looking around for people who's going to step up, who's going to start a podcast. And in Asia, people kind of wait for somebody else to step up first, right? And then somebody does it and says, well, I'm going to do this. And then everybody's in, they follow, right? So you kind of stepped up. So what did it take to start your podcast? Why did you start it?
I mean, before I get into why I started it, I've had at least 10 to 15 people ask me details about, including stuff like what microphone I use and what software I use to record, what software I use to edit my own podcast. But these guys haven't ended up starting podcasts yet. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with multiple people who've wanted inspiration and administrative help, but I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if it's an Asian thing that, you don't want to put yourself out there, or it just, I mean, I don't even know like how many listeners there are in general, like how big the market is. In general, for me, it was a bit of so I was a management consultant to the banking industry in my previous life. I started investing in crypto. My portfolio was doing decently well. So November 2017, I quit my job, moved back to India, to my parents' home to keep my cost of living low. I was based out of India for 6 months. So the first couple of months, I was basically just reading, researching, investing in crypto, reading a bunch of books outside of crypto, working out, playing tennis. Basically wanted to take a short career break. I'd been going hard for about 4.5 years. And then so beginning of 2018, so around Jan, I'd always wanted to start a podcast. I basically wanted to interview anyone who was successful. But since I'd been investing in crypto, I wanted to work with either a fund or a blockchain project. I thought, why not use podcasts as a tool to grow my network, get access to interesting people. So that was my motivation. I'd been talking about it for a couple of years. I'd always been a huge consumer of podcasts, always wanted to have my own show. My parents didn't think I would start it, but I had a couple of really good friends who basically scolded me into starting it.
Right.
And there was one friend in particular who basically designed my website, did all the back-end work for me in terms of creating a process, in terms of like what softwares to use. He's the one who designed my logo. He's the one who came up with the name for the show. So yeah, it's a big shout out to him.
No, give him a name.
His name is Abhilaksh.
Yeah.
He designs websites for a living. He's a lot more talented than that, but he just chooses to just design websites because he likes to chill.
So what did it take to actually get you started? Because obviously you'd thought about it.
Yeah.
You had people around you going, come on, Tushar, get this done, come on. But what was the pivotal moment where it actually happened?
It was just one day. I mean, it was a friend's birthday actually, and it was a small gathering, and we had driven for about like a couple of hours away from where I was actually living, and on the way back from this birthday party, my friends was basically like, I was obviously at a pretty low moment at that point because I wasn't doing anything, right? My crypto portfolio was doing fine, but like I still felt pretty useless in life. And I just decided to, basically I don't know what it was, but basically that day I just needed that kick on my backside, and from that day onwards,
it happened.
Ass was on fire.
Yeah. What was the first one you did?
It was with a blockchain project called Electrify with a guy called Martin. I got him on the show through a cold message on LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah. And when you did that first podcast, did you know everything about how you were going to do it? Did you have a format? Did you just wing it? How did it work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I use Zoom to record my podcasts, so nothing too fancy. It was audio only. I had a script prepared, so I had some questions in mind. Obviously, most of these crypto projects, you got to do a little bit of research so that you sound smart.
Yeah.
And so I researched a bit about Martin, who was the interviewee, and the project, which was Electrify. I mean, it wasn't too big of an issue. I think I'm still kind of struggling with like getting rid of the ums and the ahs. That's something I think you can always work on. A lot of times when you're in an interview, it seems pretty okay, but then you listen to it later, and you're like, oh, I have all these ums and ahs.
Do you edit those out?
I used to. I don't have the time anymore. I recently hired a freelancer in Philippines who does that for me now. But again, I'm not too picky. I let the conversation flow. I mean, if there's ums and ahs, it's fine.
It's authentic.
Absolutely.
It's real.
I mean, and that's how it's more conversational as well, right?
Yeah, rather than an interview.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what people want. They want to know that this is real.
Yeah.
And they might say something which is off script, right? Which is important. It's kind of why people listen. Everything else is on the website, right? I want to get that sort of human conversation that you're going to help me sort of get into when you interview that person.
Absolutely. Right? But if there's a major mistake, then obviously I edit it out. And now I've reached a point where while I'm interviewing someone, and also because it's audio, I'm making notes of what to like cut out, because I don't want to listen to the whole thing again and kind of go back, figure out what that point was, and then edit it out.
Right.
Just little things to be more efficient with my time.
Okay. So you've done 31 now.
31, and yes, 3 Korean podcasts, so 34 in total.
So where you are now, Tushar, sort of 31 in, 34 in, and where you were starting that first one.
Sure.
How have things changed for you? I mean, let's talk about the podcast. I want to talk about you as the person as well, because I think you've learned something in the journey.
Sure.
How has the podcast changed? Are you doing it differently? Is there something that you do more of now, which you think, actually, I didn't really value at the beginning, or the things that you kind of drop? Is there a different style, a different vibe?
From a podcasting perspective, for the interview in general, I don't think much has changed. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, the podcast has impacted my life in many ways. I've gotten a lot of things out of the podcast. But in terms of the way I interview, not really. There's a couple of changes that I'm in the process of making. So I've only done audio podcasts so far, in the process of transitioning into video. And the others are more around sort of putting processes in place to kind of optimize my time. Yeah. Because I spend about 12 to 14 hours a day for my actual day job, Sunday to Friday, 6 days a week. So, and somewhere in between that, I have to fit in the podcast, including doing the research, the production stuff, the post-production, the marketing. So I've just kind of, tried to make things more efficient from a process perspective, even from a marketing perspective, just trying to sort of not institutionalize, but just put processes in place.
Absolutely.
Just in the process of hiring someone to do my post-production and marketing.
I think it's absolutely important. People don't realize how much heavy lifting is involved in a podcast. It looks easy, but then it's a bit like spinning plates, isn't it? Like you're either getting guests or editing or like pushing it out and so on. Once you do one, the other one sort of like goes. But having process is key here.
Absolutely.
People don't see that though. They just see the podcast. Yeah, I can do that 45 minutes, no problem.
Just record and upload, right? But there's MP3 tagging, and there's putting in the logo, writing out the show notes.
Right.
Putting because I put an image of the person that I interview for my website. You want to add beyond the MP3 tags. You want to add tags to the blog post, and then kind of market it on the usual platforms, so Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. But beyond that, the crypto community is really active on platforms like Reddit, Discord, Telegram,
of course, yeah.
Yes. So leverage those platforms to market the
you got to get out and hustle, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't stop once you've recorded it and produced it. You got to get out there and push it out.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you about how it's impacted your life, but let's sort of back up a little bit and talk about your day job, if you like.
Sure.
So that's important to put it all into context because you've already mentioned it. You're a busy man. You are involved in a crypto-based fund. Is that right?
That's right.
How would you describe it? And obviously that's related to Golden Gate Ventures, right? So
that's right, yeah.
Let's put all that into context. Help us understand Lunex Ventures, what it's about.
Sure. So I think it's kind of the whole thing is related as well. So I got the job through the podcast.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
There you go. Proof in point. That is a reason why everybody should start a podcast if they want a job in a place like this, right? So
it's a good way, right? I mean, and like I said, the other guy, and shout out to Jason Choi as well, who's the other podcaster from this part of the world who runs a podcast called Block Crunch. He got his job through the podcast as well, as a fund manager. We're both young, we're both first-time fund managers, and we both got the job through the podcast. So I started the podcast. So I started kind of working on it in end of Jan this year. My first podcast was out on the 12th of March. Again, I sort of built a network and got access to people through the podcast. The podcast has a partnership with Tech in Asia. So Tech in Asia publishes revised transcripts of the podcast that I do, selectively, of course. And then what happened was family offices and venture capital funds, they read Tech in Asia, and they saw this new podcast. So, JKM has a partnership with Tech in Asia. There's some other podcasters who have partnerships with Tech in Asia. And so I started receiving inbound emails from these family offices, VCs. And all this time I was still based out of India. So I would get these emails, and I had positioned the podcast to be based out of Singapore and not India. People just think you're more credible if it's based out of Singapore. So I was getting all these inbound emails, and I would have a call with these people, but tell them that, I'm can't meet because I'm traveling. I'll hit you up when I'm back in Singapore. And so once I had enough kind of meetings lined up, moved back to Singapore, 2 weeks back to back, met all the stakeholders relevant in the crypto ecosystem. So whether it was exchanges, accelerators, funds, entrepreneurs, founders, technologists, thought leaders, service providers, the whole gamut, right? And one of the people I met is my current boss, and so the two of us are building out Lunex Ventures,
right,
which is the crypto.
He had heard the podcast before you'd met.
So someone from Golden Gate heard the podcast,
right?
And so I had moved back to Singapore. I didn't know they were starting this crypto fund. I thought I'm meeting someone from Golden Gate. Golden Gate is obviously a well-recognized brand in this part of the world. And, I was super pumped to meet them. But I didn't know they were starting a crypto fund. I thought they just wanted to know what I was up to. I was unemployed, and I thought I'll just get a free breakfast out of it. So we meet at this hipster cafe on Duxton Road in Singapore. And so I'm just, whoever I meet, I just generally talk about some of the principles in life that I live by, my thoughts on crypto, where it's headed. And it was a very nice 1.5 hour discussion. And after which, Kendrick, who is the partner at Lunex Ventures, the founding partner, was... he basically said, I'm setting up this fund and I'll get in touch with you. So and I thought that meant like 3-4 months down the line. But the next day he's like, can you come back in? Went back in to the office, met him again, had a great conversation. And within 2 weeks I was working to build out Lunex Ventures.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What does that say, I think, for anybody who's listening in terms of getting a job, landing a job?
I mean, it's, man, like last year, November, I was unemployed. I had no direction. I didn't know where I wanted to go.
Right.
And started the podcast, got this partnership. Now I'm obviously expanding the partnerships globally. working at the fund, to be a principal at a relatively decently well-known fund at 26. I mean, it's a blessing, man.
Absolutely. And I think as well, there is something to be said for why you should start a podcast. I mean, it doesn't have to be a podcast. It could be anything, a show. It could be writing. It could be publishing a book. However it is, it's just getting yourself out there.
Content is king, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, in this space, especially in a new space like crypto, people naturally look for leaders, and leaders are the ones who plant flags and say, rally round, folks. Like, I might not be an expert, but I know people. I'm trying to join the dots here, which is what you're sort of achieving through those podcast episodes, right? 31 in.
Yeah.
And also giving a voice to other people, like, for example, your Korean host as well.
Absolutely.
So the ability to do that, even in the crypto space, I mean, blockchain space, there's a lot of people talking, but there's nobody actually showing much leadership, right? And this is the challenge, isn't it? It's kind of natural in that space because it's very decentralized anyway. Yeah. And we sort of turn to characters like Vitalik Buterin, who's not really sort of a leader type in terms of personality. And then you've got the Binance guys and, there's nobody actually standing up and said, right, okay, I'm not actually selling anything here, but I'm trying to make sense of what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
So, with all due respect, even at 26, it's like if you stand up and say, right, okay, I'm here, I'm trying to make stories out of all of this, connect it, that is really valuable in the blockchain and the crypto space. So I think that's appealing to somebody who is saying, right, who do we know who can give us high visibility plus access to a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's about leadership, or at least that's sort of never crossed my mind. For me, the biggest thing was getting access to people. I mean, it becomes really, and again, and we can talk about that as well. So one of the most important reasons, or one of the fundamental reasons why this podcast exists is because of Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk. Content is king. And I genuinely believe that. I think you brought this point up like a couple of minutes back as well. Even if you don't want to put yourself out there in an audio format or interview people, you could be tweeting, you could be writing Medium blog posts, you could be just, writing thoughtful, short paragraphs on LinkedIn. The whole idea is to sort of be out there. I mean, attention is currency today, right? Like he says. And so that was one of my biggest inspirations in terms of, first of all, quitting my job as well. I wouldn't have quit my job if it wasn't for him. Secondly, I mean, the podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Gary. And yeah, I mean, in general, it helps. Like my sister says this, right? She's 20 years old. She studies in Hong Kong University. She's like, you're always on my LinkedIn, right? And so that's the whole point. That's what you're going for. You always want to be at the top of everyone's minds. And obviously, I have a lot of investors who are investors into the fund. You have a lot of entrepreneurs. You have some of the corporates that are going to buy out these companies that we're investing in at some point in the future. You're all connected to them on either Facebook, or even though I don't like that, but a lot of people send Facebook requests and I accept it, LinkedIn or Twitter. And they keep seeing what you're doing, right? It helps attract, you sort of become the apex. All the information kind of starts coming to you.
You're that guy in their mind, right? Everybody wants to put you in a box. Rightly or wrongly, being in a box is very powerful. Because like you say, tension. But if you were like, for example, the crypto guy, if everybody says, like, who do you know in the crypto space?
Absolutely.
That's what you want. That immediate top of mind, right? Because, I just saw him the other day posting about something, right? That's the power, isn't it? And to identify yourself, and in a world of noise, where attention is starved, right? To be that person in a specific space is really powerful. And to own it as well, I think is key. So,
100%. Absolutely.
Podcast. I mean, why did you choose to podcast rather than, let's say, YouTube, or let's say, why did you start out in space, or rather than, for example, writing a blog, or why was that a natural step for you?
Yeah, again, it goes back to what Gary Vee says, right? I mean, you sort of, and that's why I'm in the process of transitioning into video. First of all, I mean, I think I was a little bit shy as well. I wasn't sure how many podcasts I would do. I obviously wanted to do it over the longer term, and that, but I didn't. I mean, and that's why even today, a lot of times I don't have these fancy mics because initially when I started off, I didn't know how much money I should invest into it because I don't know how long I was going to do it for. But going back to what Gary Vee talks about, right? Repurposing content. So what you want to do is ideally create a 20-minute video, and basically that's your sort of anchor content that you're producing. And then everything else that happens is sort of picked up from that 20-minute video. So I like I said, so I recently hired a freelancer who's going to help me do that. But from that 20-minute video, what you want to do is, first of all, rip out the audio, put it as a podcast. So you have the video, you put it on YouTube, you put it on Instagram TV. You rip out the audio, distribute it on the podcasting platform. Then you want to take out 10, 12, 15-second clips, put it on Instagram, put it on Twitter, put it on Facebook, put it on LinkedIn. You want to pick out anything controversial, anything important that was said, and tweet that in text format. You want someone to kind of summarize it in a blog. So basically try and find as many points of distribution as possible, because there are people who are really, like my housemate, for example, is really active on Twitter, but no other platform, right? He's deleted Instagram, he's deleted Facebook. The only platform he's active is on Twitter. And there are people like that. I know people who've deleted all other platforms except for email and LinkedIn. And so you want to basically capture everyone, right? And again, you want to basically, forgetting the word, but basically make sure that the content that you're putting on each of these platforms is relevant to that particular platform, right? So you can put a quick meme on Instagram, and you can put something witty on Twitter. You can create a nice thread on Twitter. You can have a long form blog post, and you can collect all of this and publish a book as well for some people who like reading books. Right? You could create like a short movie after you have like 100 episodes. I mean, there's so many things that you can start doing with it. I wish there were two of me. I mean,
Well, that's the ongoing challenge of life as an entrepreneur, isn't it? Yeah. In the 30 episodes plus that you've done, what have you sort of discovered in terms of what really worked? Not just the content, but like, for example, in your marketing, getting it out there. And maybe the surprises as well, because it is an experiment, isn't it? It's a learning curve. You have to try lots of different things, different lengths, different formats, different styles of interviews, and different ways of pushing it out there. For you, have you had any sort of surprise successes, or even like, for example, in your guests, bringing people in, which you don't know if they can talk until they sit here and think, wow, bloody hell, they are really good. I never thought they were going to be like that. Surprises in your 31 plus career in podcasting?
I wish I could say that there were, but I mean, to be honest, it's been it's been a very, very fulfilling journey. It's given me access to some incredible people, and I can tell you some of the more fascinating people that I've interviewed. But not really. I mean, in terms of sort of driving traction, in general, if your guest has a decent following on different social media platforms, that really boosts up the numbers, and so you have certain episodes which are just anomalies in terms of the number of downloads that you get, right? And also there are some podcasts which are just better than others in terms of content, and those, or someone tweets about it, or someone puts it on some random Reddit thread, and like you see a pop, right?
But can you control that? I mean, can you replicate that? I mean, you get that Reddit hit, and then you think, wow, I want more of that.
Yeah,
difficult to replicate, isn't it? So
I'm not very good at marketing.
Right. Okay.
I mean, it's again.
So what do you focus on? Just creating great conversations, great content, rather than say, right, I've got to go out and hustle this.
I wish I had more. First of all, I wish I had more time to market things, because I think that you can sort of industrialize the marketing process as well. It's a whole engine now. Growth hacking, you can define growth hacking today in terms of how to go about it, right? I wish I could do more of that, and I wish I did more of that. I don't market the podcast well enough. I create really good content, but I think I could really, really improve on the marketing bit. But that's where I'm trying to make improvements, right? By hiring someone else, because I'm really strapped for time at the moment. And so and also I'm like, trying to do little things, and it kind of correlates to my job as well, right? So there's certain sectors that we're looking at within the broader crypto landscape. There's certain subsectors that we're looking at investing in, and so what you can do is interview guests from the subsector that you're looking at. Or what I typically do is sometimes I'm strategic about the kind of guests I'm bringing on, right? So if I really like a company or a project and I think it could be good from an investment perspective, I bring the CEO of that company on. And so while you're on air, you just basically talk about the project, but the real connection is built before and after.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after is when you actually find out what are the problems that these guys are facing, how you can help them, can you invest in them, are they looking for funding, and just, that's part of your sort of building
Due
the
diligence
relationship
as well, right? I mean, you can learn a lot about
Absolutely.
an investor. If you're investing in the person essentially, and their team, you're going to learn a lot about them by sitting with them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, for these guys, I mean, the people that I'm talking about are usually the people that you have to pitch to, not the other way around. So there are certain companies that you want to get into as an investor, and the entrepreneur is kind of spoiled for choices in terms of whose capital to take. So how do you stand out as an investor?
So is that a road in for you to do the podcast?
Absolutely.
And then build a relationship?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great business development tool, if anything.
Absolutely.
Right?
So what you do is you basically out-research everyone. I've spent up to like 48 hours researching for one episode, where you just go so deep into a project and you know things about the project that maybe the CEO of the company hasn't thought of either. And you use the podcast as a platform to talk about all the things that you've researched on, all the ideas that you have for that company. And the thing is, again, so with Lunex, our mandate, we have a global mandate, right? So it's not just Asia focused. So Golden Gate Ventures already has a brand name in this part of the world. Lunex we're trying to build a brand name, but again, Golden Gate's brand is more sort of Southeast Asia specific, whereas for Lunex, we have a global mandate. So we want to attract global deal flow. So how do you do that sitting in Singapore? I mean, I think next year we'll be traveling a fair amount. But in the meantime, podcasts are a great tool to kind of get deal flow in.
Right. Yeah. And I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more funds tie podcasts to the front end of the deal
and
flow.
I think that's happening. I mean, so I'm in the process of, I think it's just about to sort of materialize. A partnership with yourstory.com in
they're
India.
huge in India, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Tech in Asia equivalent. And they are sort of trying to create a network of podcasts also. And the only other podcast that they have is by Accel India, if I'm not wrong, which is a massive, I think they have more than $1 billion under management in India, a VC fund as well. And I think that's happening. I think 500 had partnered up with Jason Choi, the Block Crunch guy, for a few episodes. A16 in the US has their own episode for crypto. I mean, it's getting more and more.
Yeah. Well, I think the business case is evolving, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like it's now not just PR. It's like this can actually bring in deals. Like it can bring in, it can do due diligence. It can help get people into the domain of the fund, and also the fund through the door of an entrepreneur who's sort of well sought after in the market.
Yeah.
And that is slowly emerging, that model. We're only sort of getting there and realizing, and like, for example, what you're doing, like people are going to see that and think, actually, that works. Like we should be doing that. And you're going to see that now starting to replicate in different parts of the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so and what about yourself in terms of the future?
Yeah.
Because you ain't going to get any less busy.
Yeah.
Right. I know you said you're hiring people.
Yeah.
And I suppose the challenge with any podcast is just maintaining momentum, because it's when it slows down, it gets tough. And when it gets tough, people think, well, I'll skip this month. And then it's like, okay, that's it now. You're done. Like trying to resurrect a podcast after, like 2 months out is the toughest part. So how are you trying to do that? Are you sort of changing your expectations about what it can be, because it's not your full-time gig, therefore, or are you trying to merge it more with what you're doing at Lunex, or how does it work for you?
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was planning to not release any podcasts for December.
Oh, okay, there you go. Well, there you go.
No, but it's, like it's been a roller coaster of a year for me.
Yeah.
I kind of started the year on a low, went up really, really high in the middle of the year, and I think I've sort of come back down.
Well, you got a job, you see, so now you're principal of a fund.
Yeah, but and that's been, I mean, there's only 2 of us at the fund, right? So building it out. Obviously, we have the support of the back office at Golden Gate, but it still gets really, really hectic. where like we've been involved in structuring the fund, fundraising, staying on top of the industry, getting deal flow, doing due diligence, actually making the investment, and then helping the portfolio company while still running the podcast, right? And so that gets really hectic. So I'm totally burnt out. In terms of the frequency, but yeah, now it's I want to take December kind of off, and then sort of start strong in 2019. But I'm pretty confident that it's not gonna be challenging to sort of start again. I mean, I already have interviews lined up for Jan. Some of the folks that I've been trying to interview, who are very busy in their own right, and so it takes a couple of months to schedule some interviews. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to die down. I mean, I think it's only going to pick up. I think the fund is sort of co-producing the podcast as well. So I mean, the podcast is on the fund's website and things like that.
The key is consistency, isn't it? Because even if you scaled it back to once a month, for example, that's key. People expect that now. Then you can easily maintain that at a rate. I mean, if you wanted to do once a week, that's fine. But I don't think you've got the bandwidth right now, unless you've got other people sort of, got a team working around the podcast. Yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? So
I mean, I think you can still do it. It's just that because we're setting up the fund, it's a little bit tricky. But once the fund is a little bit up and running, I think it'll be fine. But again, I'll have a lot of travel next year, I think. And so that makes it tricky as well, right? I think I need to make it more process oriented. It's just about putting the process in place. I mean, for the post-production stuff and the marketing stuff. I mean, for both. Obviously, I mean, in crypto, like your number of downloads go up and down with the prices of crypto.
You can't control that, right?
You can't control that. I mean, and that's not even the point. I don't even look at it. I mean, the only times I've looked at it is when sometimes people reach out to kind of advertise or sponsor stuff on the podcast. I haven't monetized it yet. I've had plenty of opportunities to.
You don't want to?
I want to. I don't mind monetizing it, but it has to be with the right partner.
Right.
There's a lot of, I mean, again, I go back to why I started the podcast, right? The podcast was to get access to people, to build a brand for myself, and to basically network. And so you don't want to lose your credibility by having certain sponsors who later turn out to be, so you got to do your due diligence in terms of who you bring on. So I'm talking to a couple of people. I'm very open to sort of helping like some of our portfolio companies get on for free as well. I mean, the idea was never to monetize it. I've literally had people be like, I'll send you 5 Ether, interview me. And this was when Ether was like $800. And
so take it now rather than later.
I mean, even when I started, I was a couple of episodes in, and there were people who were like, here's 5 Ether, and that was it's tough to say no to that, right? It's like $4,000 for one episode. I mean, at that point, but you're like, I mean, I didn't. You take a longer term view, and that's what we do at the fund as well, right? It's a 5-year closed-ended fund. There's a lot of funds that are, I think, close to shutting down now with crypto prices falling, especially funds that had a shorter term horizon. So I mean, I'm just, again, and this goes back to what Gary Vee talks about, right? About having patience and being young and sort of going all in when you're younger, keeping your needs low, but having a long term horizon. You sort of leave money on the table in the short run to sort of win in the longer run. And so a lot, again, I think
that's investment though, right? You give before you get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also about like, I mean, when you're 24, 25, 26, you don't think like that, right? So it was good to have, like Gary Vee.
Yeah, kind of, obviously he's had a big impact here. Which
massive,
is great.
massive.
Yeah.
And a couple of other people, right? So Gary Vee is one end of the spectrum where he's like, I'm going to work 18-hour days and it's all about the grind and the hustle. And then you have other like VCs like, if you know Naval Ravikant, they follow him on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Certain principles, like he talks about kind of how to leverage yourself, right? Or how to leverage up a business. And so he talks about capital, media, tech as 3 sort of pillars on which you can leverage yourself up or leverage your business up. And the best businesses, best individuals leverage up all 3. So the podcast for me was leveraging up media. The fund is kind of leveraging up capital. Still need to work on the tech aspect.
We're in the right space. So
it's, I guess
we'll see.
By virtue of being at the forefront, of technology, leverage up technology. But yeah, I think those are 3 ways to kind of, leverage things out. And that's Naval, right? So he's all about, I'm not the hardest worker, but you want to leverage up things so that all your gains are sort of outsized for limited effort. And so, I've kind of created sort of my own principles based on, I think most of my principles are sort of based on these 2 guys who sit on very different ends of the spectrum. Yeah.
Good. Well, listen, it's been really interesting finding out about you, Tushar. And I think before you go, shout out to the podcast itself. Where do we find it? Decrypt Asia.
Yeah, so the website is decrypt.asia. Active on all platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And it's on, all the podcasting directories.
The usual. We'll put all the details in the show notes.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Good. And I wish you all the best with the ongoing journey and, building out that fund and your world domination plans.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And, keep doing what you're doing because I know you don't see it as a leadership position, but media, any sort where you stand up and take a stand and prepare to take the arrows from the critics is a leadership position, right? And in this space, people need it, especially now where, it's not as glorious and as sexy as it once was, right? It needs people who say, let's make sense of everything, guys. This is where we are, and tell that story about, where we've come from. Yeah. This is the challenge, but this is where we're heading to, right? And that's what it needs right now. So Tushar Aggarwal, everybody, crypto, blockchain, VC, and podcast host. More podcasts in 2019. Don't give up on that. I know I didn't want to jinx you with December, but you're going to continue. Be back.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
You're going to have a break, back to India, back in Singapore 2019.
Absolutely.
Onwards and upwards. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.